Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and back to another video. If I look kind of a mess right now, it's because I had to quickly put my hair in a little bun and put some clothes on because I was watching The Breakfast Club, their recent interview with Candace Owens, and I was like, I gotta stop and I had to react to this blindly because just from the few minutes of what I was watching, which I already knew because I love Candace Owens, I knew it was going to be a fire interview, and she did not disappoint. She did not disappoint. So I want to go over this interview. Now it's about an hour and 8 minutes long, so I'm not going to watch the entire thing here because that would just be too long of a video. So I'm going to try to find the parts that I feel, stand out the most and highlight those on this video, and then we can have a discussion and talk about it because she definitely threw down the gauntlet in her normal Candace Owens classy way, and I love it because she's opening people's eyes completely, and that's what we need right now. We need truth. Wake up and stop drinking the liberal leftist Kool-Aid that so many of us were drinking nonstop. Although this is Powerade and I love this drink. So without further ado, I have my iPad Pro here, this large screen, and I'm going to just hit play and let's watch together.
I thought I was a liberal my whole life, I thought I was on the left my whole life and really didn't pay attention to politics in any meaningful way. And then, when Trump was running for office, I didn't want him to be elected. I was like this, not because I thought he was a racist or a sexist, but just because I thought it was crazy to go from Obama, who had a certain decorum about him, to suddenly this sort of brash New Yorker. But I thought it was weird when all of a sudden the people that liked Trump, everyone thought he was like this iconic symbol of business. He was in rap songs. Trump was the status, flipped on him in 1 second. I didn't buy the narrative that he was in the media for 3-4 decades, and suddenly you wanted me to believe overnight that he was like Adolf Hitler and a racist. So I just didn't trust the media's narrative about him, and so I decided to actually listen to what he said. I still didn't vote for him in 2016. But I wanted to just listen to what he actually said. And then when I saw what he was saying versus how it was being reported, I just found it to be extremely dishonest. So I started researching more, learning more, and then I got kind of angry, just with the lies, because I do think Black Americans are intentionally manipulated emotionally by the media and, kind of kept dumb but emotional intentionally by the school system. And I started reading up on Thomas Sowell, Shelby Steele, a bunch of Black scholars that I originally had dismissed as Uncle Toms, and irony now is I get called Uncle Tom all the time. So I got what was coming, but yeah. And then I realized that actually I've always been a conservative. I just didn't know it. And economically speaking, of course, the conservative arguments make the most sense.
Does that bother you that people call you an Uncle Tom?
No, not at all. First off, because if they read the book, Uncle Tom was the hero. But also because I get it. How can I fault people for something that I would have engaged in for the majority of my life? I thought the same thing about Black conservatives. I thought it was this betrayal, but I never actually understood it. It was just an emotional response. And I think that kind of is, if you come out of the public school system, I can't imagine how you could be a Black conservative when just the way that they even tell us our own history is just not true,
Do you think that that's true?
All right, just before we go on, she said so much in that one little segment. So I love what she said about Trump because it's so true. If you think about it, Donald Trump, before he became a presidential candidate, was liked by a lot of people, including a whole lot of rappers. The Black community used to rock with Trump. He was definitely somebody that people wanted to associate with. People wanted to be on his TV show The Apprentice because he was just a very down-to-earth type of person, and people really liked him. And the moment he became not only a presidential candidate but a threat to the Democratic Party, that's when he became the #1 enemy. That's when people were like, oh, hold up a second, wait a minute. He's going up against Hillary. He's a threat to liberal politics and Democrats and the fundraisers and the moneymakers of the party. And that's a problem. That's a problem. And the fact that he was blunt and had no filter, like most New Yorkers, and I'm one myself, that was a threat. Because think about it. How is it that he was a racist in 2016 suddenly, but he wasn't a racist all the years prior when you watched his shows and liked him? Now all of a sudden, you can't stand him. He's a racist. It's very convenient. And I also love, of course, that she's talking about, as a person of color, as a Black woman, she's not allowed to have certain perspectives or certain opinions without being called an Uncle Tom or being called a traitor or people just hating her. There are a lot of people that cannot stand Candace Owens, and I guarantee you they've never actually listened to a full interview to hear her full thoughts. They've only heard sound bites, little snippets, little clips, headlines, and that's it. And that was enough for them to say, oh, she's that kind of person, without truly really understanding what she believes and what her foundation of beliefs are based on. I think if more people took the time to actually listen to her, you would be shocked. And I say that as somebody who used to be on the opposite end of things when I was on the left, and I could not stand Candace Owens. I couldn't stand the sight of her. Like, she annoyed me, didn't like her. I thought that she was just a mouthpiece for Republicans. She was an extremist. You know, all the stupid things that you say when you're not educated, I said about her, until I started to actually do research. I started watching her full interviews, that I started to realize, oh, wait a minute. She's making sense. She's making a lot of sense. And maybe I was wrong. Let's keep watching.
I mean, it was his Dimondale, Michigan speech particularly. He got up there and he just started listing all of the statistics in Black America in terms of poverty. I mean, these were just real statistics that he was talking about. And his pitch was basically like, you've been giving your vote to Democrats for 60 years. Why don't you just try something different? Mm-hmm. You know? I think that's a pretty good elevator pitch. Yeah. Like, hey, you've been doing the same thing for a long time. I'm not saying I'm amazing, but why don't we try something different and see if it gets better for you? And then suddenly I flipped over to CNN and it was Don Lemon's crying. You know, I think it was, I'm maybe being, but it was just, they were so dramatic and they were lying about what he said. They're like, he looked you in the face and told you you were poor. I'm like, that's not what he did at all. Mm-hmm. So I just got interested. I'm a very curious, interested person. If I get interested in something, I will just take it all the way, read books. And I'm like, why are they doing this? Like, why are all the media companies that I believed my whole life just lying about it? Just say what he actually said and let Black Americans decide for themselves if that's a good enough pitch. They may have said no. I thought it was interesting, but the lying is something that I think is outrageous. It's gotten out of control. One of the wildest things, the craziest things that people say about me all the time, and it drives me crazy because it's literally made up. They're like, Candace said racism doesn't exist. If you go find that headline of Candace says racism doesn't exist, they didn't put it in quotation marks because I never said it. They were like, Candace said racism doesn't exist because she's quote unquote never been a slave. The words never been a slave came out of my mouth, but I never said racism doesn't exist. And it was in the context of an entire speech. The media knew that Black people were not going to go watch the speech or try to find the original speech. They were just going to read the headline and react and be like, oh my God, Candace Owens said racism doesn't exist. Like, how could she say this? She's a hypocrite. She's a liar.
And that's exactly what happens all the time. I mean, I follow some blog pages like The Shade Room and Hollywood Unlocked, and every time they post a Candace Owens clip, it's always a little snippet of the most controversial thing, and they never show it in full context, right? They'll just have the quotations of what she said without giving you the full quote or the full context of the conversation, and then people just run with it. Because if you already have a preconceived notion about who somebody is, no matter how wrong you are about that person, and you see a salacious headline, it's only going to confirm your beliefs about that person, however negative they may be. So she's absolutely right. And the media knows this. The media, they are, especially liberals, they are masters at the game of manipulation when it comes to perception. They know that perception is reality. Doesn't matter how real the actual quote or the opinion is, that's all that matters. So she's absolutely right. You know, most people are going to see her quotes. They're not going to actually do research and say, let me go find the full interview that's 2 hours long and watch the full interview to get the full context. No, they're going to just take their little snippets because it's fast and easy. We all have ADD now, and they're going to scroll, listen to it, give an opinion, and then keep scrolling. And that's unfortunately the world that we live in today, where everything is just fast-paced information, that nobody's really stopping to listen to the information and get the full context and say, let me do my research before I form a full opinion. It's very easy to just cast somebody out who doesn't fit the narrative, especially when they don't look the part of what you would expect them to say. A Black woman talking about conservative politics and having a conservative perspective and not buying the liberal Kool-Aid, she must be a sellout. As opposed to, let's hear what she has to say. Because like she said, when Trump was talking in that speech and he said, what do you have to lose? He's not wrong. You've been voting the same way for 60 years and you're still complaining about the system. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result.
I knew what the media was. I knew the media was all about selling a headline. I knew then I got an early lesson in the NAACP. I think organizations that never want racism to go away, because how are they going to fundraise? If you're a CEO of the NAACP and you're earning X amount of dollars, you got to keep the racism narrative going on or you're going to work yourself out of business. So the stuff that I talk about is always based on my experiences, and so it's just crazy to see how it gets manipulated in the press.
Now you said something.
Wait, did you hear that part? Did you hear that part? When your whole basis for making money is having to push the narrative of racism all the time, you don't want racism to go away. Because if racism goes away, then you can't fundraise and make money. BLM. I did a whole video on Candace's documentary exposing BLM and the fraud that organization was. So what she said, again, dropping truth bombs, left, right, and center. I mean, think about how powerful that is of what she just said. Like, for the NAACP and organizations like that, they make money through fundraising by pushing a certain narrative. People are not going to give you money if they don't feel as though there's a problem that they're trying to fix, that you're telling them is out there. So, as sad as it may sound, organizations like the NAACP and the BLM organization, they need racism or that narrative to be pushed all the time because that's how they make their money. Is it making sense?
Build the wall sounded so wild, right? Back in 2016, it sounded wild. It sounded xenophobic. And I was saying, if these illegals get into the inner city communities, the first people that are going to be harmed are going to be Black Americans.
People actually were mad at you, right? When you got into the conversation with T.I. at the Revolt Music Conference, right? And you were saying that, and people didn't understand it, but it seems like people are understanding what you were trying to say back then.
Yeah.
I mean, the funniest part, and I hate to say the word funniest, but I'm going to just say it, the funniest part about what's happening right now with all of these illegal migrants that are coming into the country and are flooding the inner cities like Chicago and New York City. The funniest part is watching liberals lose their minds. Watching liberal politicians who run these cities say, oh my God, we have a crisis. Oh my God, we can't afford all of these people. This is not right. This is not okay. What's going on? And hearing citizens in those cities sounding really similar to Trump politics when it comes to the border and border security. Funny how that happens. When suddenly it's your communities that are being affected by the lack of resources and all of the free handouts that migrants are getting at the expense of the people who live in those areas, i.e. the inner city, Black and brown people. Now suddenly they understand why Trump wanted border security. Because look around. Look at what's happening right now. And I'm glad that it's affecting the inner cities, because if it wasn't affecting the inner cities and it was only affecting Texas and the South and the border states, people up north, people in the large coastal cities wouldn't understand. They would just say, oh, you're just being racist, you're being racist. It isn't until it affects you personally that you realize how stupid and how ignorant and how short-sighted just saying racism is when you try to speak about immigration, illegal immigration, and the effects economically that it has on the people of this country. We're watching it in real time. In real time. So yeah. Trump was right.
Why do you think people give you a lot of backlash for questioning people and having questions? I see all the time with Charlemagne, if we question something that Kamala Harris did, or question something that Joe Biden did, or question somebody that's Democrat did, why do you think our people have so much backlash when you ask so many questions?
Well, because I think that they don't realize that they've been manipulated against their own interests. And a lot of it is, when you start telling the truth, you become a problem to the establishment, right? So if you're the military industrial complex and you want people to just kind of sleepwalk into another war, and I'm sitting here telling you that, Pentagon just can't keep finding the trillions of dollars that they send overseas. They've got this budget and they're sending all this money to Ukraine, and then they say, oh, we don't know where all the money went. It's being laundered and it's being sent back to a very small group of powerful people. And so when you have someone like me who's cutting through all of the emotional arguments, you have to turn that person into persona non grata, right? And what better way to do it than to have their own community attacking them and saying that they're, pro-white or anti-Black. I mean, it's a nonsense things that they say about me. If you listen to what I'm actually saying, I'm sitting here providing a blueprint for Black Americans to get ahead, because it's time, okay? It's time. We've been doing this for a very long time in this country. Black America, wake up.
First, I love DJ Envy's question to her when he asked her, why do people have an issue when you ask certain questions or you question certain people? And notice he mentioned Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Democrats, liberals. Like, you're not allowed, if you're Black or brown, we are not allowed to ask those questions without being deemed a traitor, which is so stupid. And I love her answer, which is because people don't realize that they are being manipulated and that they have been manipulated this whole entire time. That's why people have been sold and bought this story of what the narrative is. And anybody who comes to disrupt that narrative with truth gets immediately branded an Uncle Tom, a liar, an extremist, a white supremacist, even if you're Black. Like, it's It's crazy. And the saddest part is that people buy into those narratives because they are being manipulated and they don't even realize that it's happening. When you start asking the right questions, people start getting uncomfortable because they don't want to answer those questions. And that's when you know you are on to something. And that's why Candace Owens, to that movement, is such a scary person, because she is asking questions that she isn't supposed to be asking as a black woman. And people on the left don't know what to do with her. So let's just call her crazy. That way you get to just like dismiss whatever she has to say that may be correct and true and may make sense. You won't hear it because it's coming from Candace Owens, the nut job, manipulation.
I want to go back to something you said earlier, because I know a lot of people will hear you say, well, Candace, you're speaking a lot about, the black family, but then you married a white man.
Yeah,
Dr. Umar would have a huge problem with that.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Dr. Umar?
I have heard of him. I have not listened to him, I'll be honest. What is his argument, actually, if you could just repurpose his argument?
He's crazy.
Everything black.
No.
Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Pretty much.
Every damn
No,
thing.
he feels black men should be with black women, because when you're talking about it from an economic standpoint, you want to grow the wealth as a black family.
But that doesn't...
And if you marry somebody from another race, then, your wealth will be with that person, and he doesn't like that.
Okay, I would love to talk to him more about that, because, it's always very interesting to me to hear this paradox of black people who will make an argument that, the system is racist, and then also make an argument like this, which is essentially making an argument for the Supreme Court to revisit Virginia versus Love and basically say that black Americans and white Americans shouldn't be marrying. I think the greatest thing ever is when people come together on the basis of who they love and get married. For me personally, I never thought of my...
Really quickly, I love what she just said. I always find it interesting when I look online and I see people who get upset when they see a black person, whether it be a man or a woman, who falls in love with a person of a different ethnicity or race, and just the outpouring of prejudice that I see in the comments, of anger, like immediate anger, always blows my mind, because I'm like, how does that person over there affect you in your life? Like, how is it that they can make you so upset for falling in love with somebody else who doesn't look like them? Like, think about how crazy that sounds, right? Like, how elementary that is, to be upset because you fell in love with somebody of a different shade of color. And who cares? Like, it's crazy to me. And also, I love what she said, because the same people who will argue against the past and how horrible it was when we had segregation and we had separation of skin color and skin tone, and there was a whole paperback test and the one-drop rule and all of these racist ideologies that were created during a very dark time in history, the fact that you have people who are descendants of that dark time trying to continue on with that legacy by believing and having an opinion that you can only fall in love with somebody who looks like you, that you should not be mixing races, that you should not be mixing with another person of a different ethnicity because you're being a traitor. Think about that ideology for a second, right? Just think about that whole perspective of you can only date someone who looks like you. When white people said it was racist and prejudiced and hateful and disgusting, as it was. So why is it different if a black person says it? What's the difference? You're still fighting and arguing for segregation at the end of the day. And listen, I've heard every single excuse, so I know. I've heard it. Every justification. And guess what? Every justification and every excuse that a black person can make as to why they believe that black people shouldn't be mixing with other ethnicities and races is the same argument that white KKK members said when they were arguing for not allowing white people with other ethnicities. Same thing. Same message, different messenger. I'm just saying.
BLM, I said from the very beginning, was going to be bad. That's another one that people are saying like, oh, Candace did say this. I'm like, yeah, I did, man, because obviously it was going to be another money laundering situation. Crazy $90 million raised in no time, in a couple of months, and all that money went to trans organizations.
Yep.
Wild, absolutely crazy. Establishing the first trans neighborhood in San Francisco. Crazy, but it was obvious. It was obvious because wherever there is tons of black emotion, there is a money laundering operation that's about to get off the ground. And whenever there was like worldwide media support, why do black Americans think the media support them? As soon as you got tricked by thinking that the media was on your side, it should have been a wake up call. It went way too global, way too fast. Corporations suddenly, yes, we believe in this. And I knew that the end result was going to be that black American communities were going to be looted and rioted to the ground, and that they were training black Americans psychologically to believe that this was it. This was going to be what the advancement. This is going to be good for your cause. Get behind this organization that's ultimately going to hurt you and set you back, which is what happened. Businesses moved out of Black communities because why would you continue running a business if you're getting robbed and stolen from every 5 minutes? And now those communities are poorer, and now you have Rashida Tlaib saying, oh, Walgreens is racist because they are leaving, inner city communities. What would you like Walgreens to do? This is a for-profit business. So it incentivized bad behavior in the Black community, made businesses move out, and money laundered to a bunch of LGBTQIA, however many letters it's gotten to, organizations, which I also think is not good for the Black community.
Have you had any conversations with anybody from BLM? Like, have they ever challenged you on?
Well, I went to Patrice's house.
Oh, I remember that. Yeah.
I was very pregnant. She lied. Caught her in real time lying. I was very polite when I rang the doorbell. I went to one of her houses. She's got a lot of houses. Thanks, BLM. But yeah, I had on Hawk Newsom, who was the New York chairman for BLM. Had him on my show several times, actually. I had him on 3 times, I believe, and debated him and his ideas during that. I'm not a person that is scared to debate anybody on any topic because it's what I actually believe. I think people that run away from debates are the liars, right? Like, if you're going to sit and talk about somebody and say they think, sit down and have a debate about it, about a topic. BLM, I caught all the heat, but fortunately that's $100 million just burned and gone, and there to support trans issues if that's what Black America agrees with.
What I would say is, if you guys have not watched the documentary that Candace Owens did exposing BLM and that corrupt organization and how they used George Floyd's face to fund money that put stacks of dollars into Patrisse Cullors' pocketbooks, you've got to watch it. That's all I'll say. You've got to watch it because it will open your eyes in ways that you never thought were possible. You'll realize just how deceived so many of us were back in 2020, who ran to put the black square on our Instagrams and who just fell for the lies. And she's so right, because I remember every single, because back then I was doing skincare and hair care influencing on Instagram and also here on YouTube, hence the name. And I remember so many brands making statements on Instagram and having their little memes about how we support BLM and we stand with BLM. And it was just like an army of people, corporations that came together that saw a profit in this and jumped on the bandwagon. And funny, because I don't see them posting anything about BLM now. What happened? Oh, that's right. BLM went bankrupt when Patrisse Cullors got exposed for stealing money and, like Candace said, using majority of the funds to fund trans organizations and trans charities, which had nothing to do with the Black community. That money for BLM was supposed to go back to the Black community, was it not? Uplift the Black community. And instead, it went to trans organizations. By the way, Patrisse's husband used to be a woman. Just saying. Like I said, guys, I'm going to have a link in my description where you can watch the entire video, the entire interview. I definitely would recommend you guys watch the full interview because it definitely was an amazing 1 hour and 8 minutes that I watched. And I want you guys to be able to watch everything in full context. I only wanted to show the highlights in this video so you guys could have a reason to watch the full video. Let me know in the comments down below if you have watched it, what are your favorite parts? I definitely want to hear about them in the comments down below. If you enjoy my content, please do not forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit my notification bell so you know when I post a brand new video. Until next time.